It was a regular afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of sunny day where the streets were bustling with people going about their business, the hum of traffic filling the air. Keanu Reeves and Jason Statham, two of Hollywood's most iconic action stars, were walking down the sidewalk, enjoying a rare moment of peace. Neither one was dressed in their typical action hero attire. They were just two regular guys, sporting sunglasses and casual clothes. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon, the kind where they could blend into the crowd and escape the chaos of their celebrity lives for a moment. But as they strolled down the street, they couldn't have known that today wouldn't be as ordinary as it seemed. Up ahead, a group of bikers on loud, roaring motorcycles were hanging out, revving their engines and showing off their massive rides. They were exactly what you'd expect. Big, burly guys, tattoos covering their arms, leather jackets that looked like they'd been through 1,000 fights. The moment they spotted Keanu and Jason, the smirks began to form. "Hey, look at these two!" one of the bikers yelled out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You guys lost? This street isn't for the weak." The others laughed, their voices booming over the sound of their motorcycles. It wasn't long before the group started circling the two stars like vultures, their eyes scanning Keanu and Jason. With a look of mockery, Jason, always the hothead, shot a look at Keanu. His fists clenched at his sides, but Keanu, the ever calm, one held up a hand. "Just keep walking," Keanu muttered, his eyes locked ahead, refusing to engage with them. But the bikers weren't having it. They weren't going to let these two soft movie stars just stroll past without getting their own brand of amusement. One biker, a giant with a beard that could easily double as a pillow, revved his engine and leaned in close. "You guys look like you should be in a movie." "Oh wait, you are. But I'm sure you're nothing like your characters in real life." Keanu and Jason exchanged a quick glance. They'd been mocked plenty in their time, especially for their roles in action films. But this felt different. The bikers weren't just making fun of their acting careers, they were belittling them as men. "What would you do if we were to challenge you to a little fight, huh?" another biker sneered, getting off his bike and taking a few steps closer. Towering over the two of them, Jason was about to speak up, but Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. There was a calmness in Keanu's eyes, but underneath, anyone who knew him well would understand. This was a man who had stared death in the face more times than most people had even lived. Jason took a deep breath, eyes narrowing. He wasn't backing down either. Keanu's voice was low but firm. "You sure you want to test that theory?" The biker let out a loud, mocking laugh, stepping even closer. "What? You think you're some kind of tough guy? This is real life, not some movie set." At that moment, Keanu and Jason had a choice. They could walk away, ignore the taunts, and let these guys continue to mock them. Or they could stand their ground and show them exactly who they were, who they really were. No scripts, no cameras. Keanu glanced at Jason again, who was already rolling his shoulders, ready to throw down. Keanu let out a small sigh. "I really didn't want to do this today," but the bikers didn't know who they were dealing with. The question now was, how far were these bikers willing to take it? And would they regret mocking two of the most dangerous men to ever walk the earth? Real-life fighters who just so happened to be movie stars. The tension was palpable, and the streets of Los Angeles were about to witness something far more than they bargained for. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss the next part of this intense journey. Keanu Reeves and Jason Statham had built their careers on playing action-packed, heroic roles. But what most people didn't know was that their on-screen feats weren't just the result of special effects and stunt doubles. Behind every punch, kick, and fight scene, there were years of rigorous training and real-life experience. Their true strength wasn't simply in their muscles, but in their dedication to becoming masters of martial arts and combat. Keanu had always been known for his calm demeanor and reserved personality, both on and off screen. But few knew that this was the same man who had spent countless hours learning kung fu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu for his role as Neo in The Matrix, and even more time perfecting his skills for John Wick. Keanu wasn't just a movie star. He was a devoted martial artist. Over the years, he had trained under some of the best in the world, including renowned instructors who specialized in various combat techniques. He wasn't content with just pretending to fight. He wanted to be a fighter, to understand the techniques and philosophies behind every move. For Keanu, martial arts had always been about more than just physicality. It was a form of meditation, a way to focus and clear his mind. His dedication was quiet and humble, much like him, but in the heat of a real fight, that calmness became his greatest weapon. Jason's story was a bit different. Before becoming one of the most sought-after action stars in Hollywood, he had a history in competitive diving and martial arts. Jason's career in the British National Diving Squad had given him an unparalleled level of discipline and body control. But it was his passion for martial arts, specifically Brazilian jiu-jitsu, kickboxing and boxing, that really set him apart. When Jason got the role in The Transporter, he didn't just learn his fight choreography, he trained in real combat. Jason had fought in various tournaments and had experience in real-world combat situations. His fights weren't just about looking tough on camera, they were about doing what he loved. Every punch he threw, every fight scene he performed, was rooted in years of practice and experience. Jason was known for his aggressive fighting style, his ability to take a hit and give one right back. But there was a depth to his technique that few understood, unless they were familiar with the world of combat sports. Unlike the characters he portrayed, Jason wasn't interested in glorifying violence. He was a practitioner of the art itself. Keanu and Jason's friendship had blossomed from their shared interest in martial arts. They met early in their careers and immediately clicked, both respecting each other's dedication to the craft. They trained together in various styles, often pushing each other to improve. Their bond wasn't just based on Hollywood glamour. It was built on mutual respect for each other's skill and work ethic. But despite their skills, both men shared a unique trait, a reluctance to engage in conflict unless absolutely necessary. Keanu especially preferred to walk away from a confrontation if he could. Jason, on the other hand, had a bit more of a temper, but he was smart enough to know when not to pick a fight. They were both warriors in their own right, but they were also humble. They knew when to step back and when to take a stand. But today was different. Today, on the streets of Los Angeles, their patience was about to be tested. As they walked down the street, the group of bikers continued to mock them, escalating their taunts. One of the bikers, a huge guy with a leather jacket that looked like it had been through a dozen bar fights, swaggered up to Keanu and Jason with a smirk plastered across his face. "Hey, don't you guys do your own stunts?" the biker sneered. "Or do they have to send a real fighter to save your butts on set?" Jason was about to snap, his fists tightening. He had fought in real life before, and he wasn't someone who could tolerate being disrespected for long. But Keanu, ever the calm one, put a hand on his shoulder, silently urging him to hold back. Keanu took a deep breath, then, with the faintest of smiles, turned to the biker. "You'd be surprised how much we know about fighting, but hey, I get it. You don't recognize us outside of the movies." Jason shook his head, but there was a glint in his eyes. "Doesn't matter who we are. You really want to test us, the CEO?" Biker was still laughing, oblivious to the fact that he was about to find out exactly who he was messing with. Jason clenched his jaw, but kept his voice steady. "Look, we're not here to start anything, but you need to understand something." Keanu nodded, stepping forward. "You don't know who you're talking to, and frankly, I'm not in the mood for lessons today." The tension hung in the air. The biker's smirk faltered for a moment as he realized that Keanu and Jason weren't just blowing smoke. They weren't Hollywood stars pretending to be tough. These two were real fighters, a pair of men who had spent years perfecting their craft. And now, the bikers were about to find out just how real they were. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. They had no idea what they were about to walk into. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below. What do you think will happen next? The atmosphere was thick with tension, the heavy roar of motorcycle engines echoing through the street as the bikers slowly closed in on Keanu and Jason. The mockery in the air was palpable, but so was something else. The unmistakable feeling that the situation was about to take a turn neither side expected. Jason, still brimming with quiet anger, cracked his knuckles, his eyes locked on the lead biker, the biggest one of them all. He wasn't looking for a fight. At least not But he wasn't about to let anyone push him or Keanu around. Keanu, on the other hand, was eerily calm. His posture remained relaxed, but there was a certain intensity in his eyes, as though he had already calculated the outcome of this encounter 100 times over in his mind. This wasn't just a random street confrontation. This was a test of their resolve. The lead biker, noticing the lack of fear in their eyes, scoffed. "You two really think you can just walk away from this? You've got no idea who you're messing with." Keanu's response was smooth, almost casual. "We've seen and handled worse." Jason, not one to let a challenge slide, stepped forward. "You think you've got what it takes? You want to put that to the test?" The group of bikers, still laughing, now seemed to hesitate. The cocky confidence they had earlier was starting to waver. It was one thing to mock people who looked like easy targets, but it was another thing entirely to go toe-to-toe with men who were professionals, real fighters. Jason's posture changed. It was subtle, the way his muscles tensed, his stance shifting into a position that was almost predatory. But Keanu had already read the room. He could feel the bikers' uncertainty, the way they were, starting to second-guess their mockery. The key was to stay one step ahead. Keanu finally spoke again, his voice low and steady. "It doesn't have to be this way. We're not looking to fight, but we won't back down either." The biggest biker chuckled, trying to brush it off. "You guys really think you're tough, huh?" Keanu gave him a slight smile, his eyes unwavering. "We don't need to prove anything, but you might want to reconsider how far you want to take this." For a brief moment, the bikers exchanged uncertain glances, their bravado faltering as they realized the two men before them weren't intimidated. They were used to challenges, the kind of challenges that involved far more than just insults or idle threats. And then, without warning, one of the younger bikers, a cocky guy in his mid-20s, revved his bike one more time and darted toward Jason, swinging his arm back like he was about to land a punch. Jason's reflexes were lightning quick. He pivoted to the side, grabbing the biker's wrist mid-swing and using his momentum to send him stumbling forward into the ground. It happened so fast that the other bikers didn't even have time to react. The young biker groaned, trying to push himself up, but Jason wasn't done. He stood over the guy, his body tense, ready for anything. "Is that the best you've got?" Jason's voice was cold, his words cutting through the stunned silence. The group of bikers stood there for a moment, their bravado evaporating in the face of Jason's calm but devastatingly efficient response. The young biker glared up at him, but Jason didn't even give him a second thought, his attention returning to the others. Keanu stepped forward, looking down at the fallen biker. "I tried to warn you." At that, the tension broke. The other bikers, who had been hanging back, unsure whether to step in or not, now started to close the distance. It was clear that their confidence was gone, replaced by a growing sense of doubt. They had underestimated these two. Jason cracked his neck, glancing at Keanu. "You want me to finish this?" Keanu shook his head, his eyes scanning the rest of the group. "Let's keep this simple. We don't want to hurt anyone, just let them walk away." Jason, though itching for a real fight, understood. All right, he muttered, but his hands were still poised, ready to react if needed. One of the bikers, seeing the writing on the wall, held up his hand, signaling the others to stop. All right. We get it." His voice wavered, just a little, and for the first time there was no cocky grin on his face. "You guys are the real deal." Keanu's face softened just a little, the tension easing. "Just keep it peaceful. No need to escalate things further." The bikers, clearly embarrassed but still prideful, slowly backed off. Their bikes roared back to life as they started to pull away, giving Keanu and Jason one last look, as if to say they'd learned their lesson. As the last of the bikers sped off into the distance, Keanu and Jason exchanged a look of mutual understanding. "Well, that was fun," Jason said with a wry grin, brushing his hands off as if he'd just finished. "A light workout." Keanu chuckled softly, adjusting his sunglasses. "You're not exactly subtle when it comes to diffusing situations, are you?" Jason shrugged, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "It worked, didn't it?" Keanu nodded, but his mind was already on to the next thing. "Let's just hope we don't get any more fans like that." They continued walking down the street, their moment of tension fading into the background of the bustling city. To everyone else, It was just another ordinary afternoon in Los Angeles. But for Keanu and Jason, it was a reminder that sometimes you have to show people exactly who you are, and why it's never a good idea to underestimate those who know how to fight. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think will happen next? The streets of Los Angeles buzzed with the usual energy, the city seemingly oblivious to the tense moment that had just passed between two Hollywood legends and a group of unruly bikers. Keanu Reeves and Jason Statham, however, felt the weight of that brief but charged confrontation linger in the air. It wasn't just about the bikers or their taunts, it was about what that moment symbolized. As the bikers sped off, Keanu and Jason continued walking, their pace leisurely, but their minds were elsewhere. The city around them felt strangely distant, as if they were moving through a fog of thoughts and reflections. Jason broke the silence first, his voice calm but with an edge of curiosity. "Do you think they really understood who we are?" Keanu considered the question for a moment, his eyes scanning the busy street ahead. "I don't think they'll forget us anytime soon," he replied. "But I don't think that was ever the point." Jason raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Keanu's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes people need a reminder. A reminder that the world isn't just what they see on the surface, that there's more than meets the eye. They may have thought we were just actors, but now they know we can handle ourselves." Jason nodded, his expression thoughtful. He wasn't one to get philosophical, but he understood what Keanu meant. In the end, it wasn't about showing off or proving something to anyone. It was about standing your ground when necessary, about knowing who you are and owning it. And that was something the bikers would carry with them long after the encounter was over. As they walked, they fell into their familiar rhythm, a silence that was comfortable between them. Both of them had been in situations like this before, situations where words weren't needed, where the trust and understanding between them spoke louder than anything else. But then, as they rounded a corner, a new challenge appeared on the horizon. A few blocks away, a small cafe sat quietly on the corner. Keanu and Jason had been walking in that direction for some time, and Keanu had suggested grabbing a coffee to wind down. But as they approached, they noticed something peculiar. A crowd had gathered outside the cafe, and from the looks of it, something was going on inside. Jason's instincts kicked in immediately. "What's going on there?" he muttered, his eyes narrowing. Keanu scanned the crowd. "I don't know, let's find out." They walked closer, their attention now fully on the growing crowd. The hum of voices grew louder as they drew nearer, and Keanu felt the familiar sense of unease that came with any large gathering. It wasn't that he was afraid of crowds, but he'd learned to always be cautious of what could be waiting on the other side of a gathering. As they reached the front of the cafe, they saw a man standing on a chair, holding up his phone. He was shouting something, but Keanu couldn't make out the words. A few people were taking videos, while others were engaged in heated conversations. Jason stepped forward, his eyes scanning the crowd, looking for any sign of danger. "What's happening here?" he asked, his tone firm but polite. One of the onlookers turned to him, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "There's a guy inside saying he could beat up anyone. He's calling out all the fighters in the area." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yeah," the person said, "and he's specifically calling out famous action stars like you and Jason, saying that it's all fake, that Hollywood doesn't know real fighting." Jason chuckled, a dry, almost amused sound. "Well, isn't that rich?" Keanu, however, didn't laugh. His expression was still calm, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes, the same intensity that had been present when he faced off with the bikers. "I suppose we should go inside and say hello." Jason glanced at Keanu, his lips pulling into a smirk. This should be fun. The door to the cafe opened with a soft chime as Keanu and Jason stepped inside. The place was small but cozy, with dim lighting and an intimate atmosphere. But the mood had shifted. The moment they walked in, all eyes turned toward them. It was clear the challenge wasn't just directed at them. It was the spectacle of it all that had drawn the crowd. At the center of it stood a man, mid-30s, with a scruffy beard and an expression that screamed arrogance. He was pacing back and forth, his eyes locked on a group of men sitting at a table. "Come on, Hollywood tough guys," the man sneered, his voice carrying easily through the cafe. "I'm not scared of you. I'll take on anyone who thinks they're a real fighter. I'll prove once and for all that all those fight scenes are just smoke and mirrors." Jason's jaw clenched, and he took a step forward, but Keanu held him back. "Let's see where this goes," he said softly. The man continued ranting, completely oblivious to their presence. "Keanu Reeves? Jason Statham? Pfft, actors who can't fight their way out of a paper bag," the crowd murmured, some of them exchanging nervous glances, while others seemed eager for a spectacle. Keanu and Jason stood at the back of the cafe, waiting. Finally, the man caught sight of them. His eyes narrowed, and a smug grin stretched across his face. "Well, well, if it isn't the kings of Hollywood action. Come to prove your worth, or are you here to watch a real fighter in action?" Jason stepped forward this time, his face a mix of annoyance and amusement. "You want to see something real? You're looking at it." The man didn't back down. "Let's see if you can back up all those fake moves." Keanu placed a hand on Jason's shoulder again, stopping him from charging in. "We've got this," Keanu said quietly. The man stepped closer, his voice filled with mockery. "Let's see if the movies taught you anything. Don't forget to hit subscribe and comment below. Do you think this guy is underestimating?" The wrong people. The tension in the cafe was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every pair of eyes in the room was locked on Keanu and Jason, the two famous action stars who had just been called out by a self-proclaimed real fighter. The man at the center, his chest puffed up in false confidence, was waiting for a response, hoping for some spectacle that he could claim victory over. Jason looked over at Keanu, the familiar flicker of challenge in his eyes. But Keanu, ever the picture of calm, merely gave him a subtle nod. It wasn't that he didn't want to shut this guy up. It was that he knew how to handle things on his own terms. The crowd was murmuring quietly, some still unsure if this was all a stunt or if it was about to get real. The challenger, meanwhile, continued to taunt, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Come on, fellas, I'm just waiting for you to prove what you can really do. If you want to leave here with any pride, you're going to have to show me something real." Jason's smirk was replaced with a look of irritation as he stepped forward, but Keanu's hand shot out to stop him again. This time, it was firmer, more deliberate. "Let me handle this," Keanu said softly, his voice carrying a weight of experience. Jason hesitated for just a second, but then relented, crossing his arms and leaning against the nearest table. "All yours," he muttered. He was curious, too, to see how Keanu would handle the situation. Keanu stepped into the middle of the cafe with deliberate calm, his eyes locking onto the man who had been mocking him and Jason. The man's smug smile faltered slightly as Keanu moved closer, and he clearly wasn't used to anyone having that level of poise under pressure. "Well, well, if it isn't Mr. Hollywood himself," the man sneered, trying to keep the upper hand in this verbal sparring match. "You gonna act like you're some kind of martial artist, or are you gonna make excuses like the rest of them?" Keanu tilted his head slightly, giving the man a brief look of silent calculation. His presence was magnetic, but there was no arrogance in it, just a deep-rooted confidence in knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. "Let's make one thing clear," Keanu said, his voice smooth, but every word carrying a quiet authority. "I don't need to prove anything to you. I don't need to convince anyone who I am. But if you're really looking for a fight, I'm happy to give you a demonstration." The man's eyes widened briefly, unsure if Keanu was joking. "A demonstration? Huh? What, like in the movies? You gonna do some fancy kung fu crap?" Keanu smiled slightly, but there was a sharpness to it that sent a chill through the crowd. "You'll see." The challenger, not wanting to back down now that he'd called for a fight, squared up, his fists raised, ready to make a move. He wasn't the most skilled fighter, far from it, but he had the attitude, and that seemed to be enough for him. Keanu didn't flinch. He wasn't going to rush in or make some grand move. He wasn't here to show off or try to impress anyone. Instead, he was going to take his time, read his opponent, and move when the moment was right. The man lunged first, swinging a wild haymaker toward Keanu's head. Keanu, without breaking a sweat, easily dodged the punch, stepping aside with a fluid, almost graceful motion. The man stumbled forward, his momentum carrying him off balance. And in that instant, Keanu acted. A quick twist of his wrist, a controlled push, and the challenger found himself on the floor, gasping for air. It had happened so quickly that even the crowd needed a moment to process. 1 second, the man was throwing a punch. The next, he was flat on his back, looking up at the ceiling in disbelief. Keanu stood over him, offering no expression other than a look of mild amusement. "You'll need more than that." The crowd, which had been holding its collective breath, let out an audible gasp. They hadn't expected the fight to be so one-sided, so effortlessly executed. The challenger, now realizing he'd underestimated Keanu in the worst possible way, scrambled to his feet, eyes blazing with anger. All right, I get it, you're good," the man stammered, wiping the dirt from his clothes. He threw a few more jabs, trying to regain his confidence, but they were slow and clumsy, a far cry from the sharpness Keanu had shown. Keanu, still as calm as ever, sidestepped again, this time gently tapping the man's wrist away with the back of his hand. It was a motion so subtle that most of the onlookers probably missed it. Then, before the man could swing again, Keanu executed a flawless move. He grabbed his opponent's wrist and, in a single fluid motion, twisted it behind his back, forcing the man to his knees. The cafe was silent, except for the sound of the man's labored breathing. Keanu's grip tightened just enough to let the challenger know he was in control, but he wasn't going to break him. "Still want to keep going?" Keanu asked, his voice low. The man, his face now flush with frustration and humiliation, shook his head, his pride clearly shattered. No, I'm good. Keanu finally released him, letting the man drop back onto the floor. He gave a quick glance to the onlookers, who were all still processing what had just happened. "Next time, think before you challenge. Someone who actually knows how to fight." The man scrambled to his feet, his face burning with embarrassment. Without another word, he turned and bolted out of the cafe, his humiliation driving him away from the scene. The crowd, who had once been skeptical, now looked at Keanu and Jason with a newfound respect. There was no doubt in their minds who the real fighters were. No one expected the movie stars to be this good, and no one would ever underestimate them again. Jason, who had been watching the whole thing with a mix of amusement and admiration, gave Keanu a nod of approval. "Well, that was a statement, wasn't it?" Keanu didn't smile. He didn't need to. "Sometimes people need a reminder that we're not just actors." Jason chuckled. "You certainly gave him one." Keanu's eyes scanned the room one last time before he turned to Jason. "Let's go grab that coffee." As they walked out of the cafe, the sound of the crowd slowly faded into the background. The city seemed quieter now, as if it had taken a collective breath, exhaling in relief that the tension had passed. But for Keanu and Jason, this wasn't just about proving a point. It was a reminder that sometimes actions speak louder than words. If you've been enjoying the story, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of Keanu's moves? Would you have handled the situation the same way? Keanu and Jason walked out of the cafe, the tension of the confrontation slowly dissipating as the cool air of the city embraced them. They made their way down the street, heading for the nearby coffee shop Keanu had mentioned earlier. Despite the strange incident, there was something calming about the idea of sitting down and having a simple conversation over a cup of coffee, just two friends catching up in a chaotic world. The street was a familiar scene, pedestrians hurrying along, cars honking in the distance, and the occasional sound of a siren cutting through the buzz of the city. Yet for some reason, the air felt different now. There was a sense of anticipation that lingered, and neither Keanu nor Jason could shake the feeling that something else was about to unfold. "That was something," Jason remarked, a wry smile tugging at his lips. He hadn't expected the encounter to go so smoothly, but watching the self-proclaimed tough guy get put in his place had been oddly satisfying. Keanu nodded, his expression calm as always. Sometimes people think they know what they're up against, but they don't realize what they're dealing with until it's too late. Jason laughed softly. "You weren't just putting on a show in there, were you? You really know your stuff." Keanu didn't answer immediately, instead taking a deep breath, enjoying the rhythm of their walk. I've learned a lot over the years, but it's not just about physical skills. It's about knowing when to act and when to walk away. Jason gave him a knowing look. You've got a lot more patience than I do. Keanu smiled, though there was a hint of something deeper in his eyes. Patience is a skill, one I've had to practice. As they approached the coffee shop, Keanu glanced around, his senses still alert. It was as if the day wasn't finished with them just yet. Jason, sensing the shift, raised an eyebrow. What's up? You feeling something? Keanu paused for a second, his eyes scanning the street. I don't know, just a feeling, he said, shaking his head slightly. Let's grab the coffee, but keep your eyes peeled. Jason's instincts, always sharp, clicked into place. He nodded. Got it. They entered the coffee shop, the familiar scent of roasted beans filling the air, but the uneasy feeling that had been building never quite left. The small cafe was quiet, with a few patrons seated at tables, absorbed in their laptops or books. The barista greeted them with a smile, and for a moment everything seemed normal. But as Keanu and Jason walked to the counter, a figure stepped out from the shadows in the back corner of the shop. Keanu's eyes narrowed, and Jason tensed. The man was tall, wearing a dark jacket and sunglasses, despite the indoor lighting. His expression was hard to read, but there was something about him, something that didn't quite fit with the peaceful, everyday scene of the cafe. Jason's hand subtly moved closer to his side, as if he was ready to spring into action at any moment. Keanu, on the other hand, remained unfazed, his posture relaxed but alert. The man's voice broke the silence. Keanu Reeves, Jason Statham. Keanu and Jason both turned toward him. His tone was oddly calm, but there was an edge to it that suggested he wasn't just another casual fan wanting to say hello. Who's asking? Jason replied, his voice low and guarded. The man smiled, a thin, almost predatory smile. I think you two have made quite a name for yourselves lately. Impressive skills, I must say. Keanu studied the man for a moment, his mind working quickly. We're not interested in games. If you've got something to say, say it. The man's smile widened. I don't think you'll want to leave just yet. Jason moved in front of Keanu, his muscles taut with readiness. Listen, we don't know you and we're just here for coffee, so unless you've got something useful to say, we're not sticking. Around? The man's eyes flickered with a strange, almost amused glint. Oh, I think you'll want to stay. He stepped forward slightly, lowering his voice. You're both more involved in something much bigger than you realize. There's more going on right now than just some biker with a chip on his shoulder. You're both about to find yourselves in the middle of something much more dangerous. Jason's eyes narrowed. Dangerous? He shifted slightly, blocking the man from moving any closer. I don't know who you are, but if you're threatening us... Keanu raised a hand, silencing Jason with a glance. What do you mean by that? Keanu asked, his voice steady and controlled. The man took a slow breath, clearly enjoying the suspense. You think that little incident outside the cafe was just a coincidence? You think you're only being watched by a couple of bikers who don't know any better? There are forces out there that are interested in you two, not as actors but as fighters. And believe me, you don't want to attract the wrong attention. Jason scoffed. This is some kind of joke, right? Keanu, however, was listening intently. The man's words had a ring of truth to them, a quiet undercurrent that felt far more serious than anything Keanu had expected. He had seen enough to know when something wasn't right. Who are you? Keanu asked, his voice low but firm. The man paused, considering the question. Let's just say I'm someone who knows the bigger picture. I'm offering you a warning. Don't get involved in things you don't understand. Walk away now, while you still can. The room felt smaller suddenly. The hum of the cafe, the chatter of the other patrons, seemed to fade away as the weight of the man's words hung in the air. Jason's fists clenched, ready to act, but Keanu put a hand on his shoulder. We'll be fine, Keanu said quietly. He turned back to the man. I think we've heard enough. The man gave them a long look, his expression unreadable. Then, with a subtle nod, he turned and walked out of the cafe, disappearing as mysteriously as he had arrived. Keanu and Jason exchanged glances, both of them still processing what had just happened. It wasn't the first time they had encountered danger or unexpected challenges, but this felt different. The sense of unease hadn't completely faded. Keanu broke the silence. "Looks like we're not done yet." Jason nodded, his jaw set in determination. "This just got interesting. If you're still with us, don't forget to hit subscribe and comment below. What do you think about this mysterious warning? What's really going on here?" The city outside felt like it had shifted, or maybe it was just Keanu and Jason who had changed. The light-hearted moment they'd shared a few minutes ago, the calm stroll to the cafe, the quiet banter about the biker incident, was now distant. The man in the cafe had left a heavy atmosphere in his wake, and Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had just begun, it wasn't going to end quietly. Jason, who usually thrived on a good fight, was unnervingly quiet as they walked back toward the car. He hadn't let his guard down, and neither had Keanu. The mysterious warning, though cryptic, felt real. Whoever that man was, he didn't just show up by accident, and his words held more weight than Keanu wanted to admit. "I don't like this," Jason muttered, his voice low. "There's something off about that guy." Keanu nodded slowly. "I don't think he was bluffing." Jason gave him a sidelong glance. "You're not usually this serious. What's going on?" Keanu paused as they reached the car. The weight of the moment made his usually calm demeanor flicker. "I've had my share of encounters, but this one feels different. This isn't about some random fight or a fan who doesn't know when to quit. This is something bigger." Jason leaned against the car, clearly uneasy but holding his ground. "What are you saying, Keanu?" "I'm saying," Keanu looked around cautiously, as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows. "I think we're being pulled into something we don't fully understand." Jason stared at him for a moment, the silence between them thick. "You think it's connected to what happened earlier? That biker?" Keanu shook his head. "I don't know. But the way that guy spoke, it's like we've crossed a line we didn't even know was there." Jason cursed under his breath. "This is getting out of hand." They stood there, the hum of the city around them, feeling more like a distant backdrop to something much more pressing. Keanu's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. Whoever was watching them, whoever had sent that man to warn them, knew more about their lives than just their public personas. The world of action movies and high-profile stunts had always been a stage, but now that stage was blurring with the real world, a world that was becoming increasingly dangerous. As they got into the car and drove off, neither spoke much, the tension between them growing. The quiet hum of the engine was oddly soothing, but it couldn't quell the storm brewing inside both of them. The streets they drove through seemed too normal, too mundane. People walked by, absorbed in their own lives, blissfully unaware of what was unfolding just under the surface. Keanu, however, was fully aware of the weight on their shoulders. The moment they had dismissed the biker, they had unknowingly stepped into something much larger than themselves. Jason's voice broke through the silence. "So what now?" Keanu's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. "We need to get to the bottom of this. Whatever that guy was talking about, we can't ignore it." Jason let out a slow breath. "I don't know if it's a good idea to dig any deeper into this. The more we get involved, the more we make ourselves targets." Keanu's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I've never been one to shy away from danger. You know that." Jason looked over at him. "I know, but this feels different. That guy wasn't just some random guy with a grudge." Keanu looked ahead, his eyes scanning the road, but his mind was elsewhere. No, he wasn't. The car passed through another intersection, and Keanu's instincts kicked in. Something was off. A car was tailing them a few vehicles back, just enough to stay hidden, but close enough to not be an accident. It was subtle, but Keanu had learned long ago how to spot when something wasn't right. His pulse quickened as the realization set in. "Jason," Keanu said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jason's eyes darted to the rearview mirror, his body immediately tensing. "We're being followed." Keanu's grip on the wheel tightened, but he kept his cool. "Stay calm. Let's see how long it takes for them to make a move." For the next few minutes they stayed on the move, trying to gauge the car's intentions. It followed them through several turns, each one confirming Keanu's suspicions. The car wasn't just idling along, it was tracking them. Pull into the next alley, Keanu instructed, his voice sharp and purposeful. Jason didn't hesitate. He took the next left turn into a narrow alleyway, the tires screeching slightly as they rounded the corner. Keanu's eyes never left the rearview mirror, watching the car behind them. They had a few moments to make a decision before the pursuers would likely make their move. As they came to a stop, Jason turned off the engine. The alley was dark and narrow, lit only by a few flickering streetlights. It was a perfect place to lose someone, but only if they were quick enough. "Get ready," Keanu said, his tone dead. Serious. Jason reached into his jacket, fingers brushing against the cold metal of his concealed firearm, but Keanu stopped him with a single hand. "Not yet," Keanu said. "Let's see who makes the first move." For what felt like an eternity, they sat in silence, waiting. The only sound was the hum of distant traffic and the occasional drip of water from the walls of the alley. Every second felt drawn out, as if time itself had slowed down. Finally, the car following them came to a slow stop at the mouth of the alley, its headlights briefly illuminating the two men in the car. Keanu's heart beat in his chest, but his face remained calm, unreadable. The driver of the car got out, a figure wearing a dark hoodie, his movements deliberate and calm. He walked toward them, his gait smooth, but with an underlying sense of threat. Jason's hand hovered near his gun, but Keanu raised a finger to his lips, signaling him to stay quiet. The man didn't appear to be in a rush, but his presence was unmistakable. He was there for a reason. When he was close enough, he spoke. "Keanu Reeves, Jason Statham." Both men remained silent, but their posture shifted slightly, aware that the encounter had just escalated to a new level. "You're both making things more complicated than they need to be," the man said, his voice low but clear. "I think it's time for you to stop asking questions." Keanu's expression remained cool, but his eyes were sharp. "Who sent you?" The man's lips curled into a smile, but it was a cold, humorless expression. "You'll find out soon enough." Without another word, the man turned and walked back toward his car, leaving Keanu and Jason alone in the dark alley. Still hooked. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with the action. Who do you think is behind this mysterious warning? What's next for Keanu and Jason? The night felt colder as Keanu and Jason sat in silence in the alley, the echo of the mysterious man's words hanging in the air like a cloud of smoke. They both stared ahead, each lost in their own thoughts, but neither of them fully comfortable with what had just transpired. The man's cryptic warning had only deepened the mystery. Whoever was pulling the strings in this situation wasn't just some random player. This was bigger, more dangerous, and far more calculated than they had anticipated. Keanu was the first to break the silence. "We can't let this slide. Whatever they're involved in, we need to find out what it is." Now Jason nodded slowly, his fingers still itching to move, to act, to do something. But Keanu had taught him that patience was often the better weapon, even in situations like this. "I agree, but we have to be smart about it. We don't know who these people are or how far they'll go to keep whatever they're hiding a secret." Keanu leaned back in the seat, his gaze fixed on the alley's end where the dim lights barely illuminated the street. "We've dealt with worse, but this feels different. It's like we've stepped into something we weren't supposed to be part of." Jason exhaled sharply. "Yeah, it's not just a random thug following us. This feels like it's been orchestrated. Someone's been keeping an eye on us." Keanu's mind was racing. Every instinct told him to dig deeper, to find out who was behind this sudden shift in their lives. But there was something in his gut that warned him of the dangers. Whoever was pulling the strings could be far more dangerous than any opponent they'd faced in a movie. This wasn't pretend, and it wasn't just a fight for the cameras. This was the real deal. "All right," Jason said, his voice grim. "So what's the plan? Wait around for them to make their next move? Or do we take the offensive?" Keanu's eyes flicked to Jason, his expression unreadable. "We get ahead of them. We take control of the situation." Jason raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly are we going to do that?" Keanu gave a small, determined smile. "By digging into their world. We start with what we know and work our way from there." The next few days were a blur of restless energy. Keanu and Jason both knew that staying idle wasn't an option, so they began their investigation in earnest. They had a few pieces of the puzzle: the mysterious man in the cafe, the warnings, the fact that someone had been tailing them. But the puzzle was still too fragmented to make sense of it. Keanu had a trusted contact in the world of underground fight clubs and military circles. He had trained with some of the best, and those networks were often the ones that could give him access to the information he needed. He placed a few calls, arranging meetings with old friends who could offer insights into the strange warning they'd received. Meanwhile, Jason took a different approach. With his connections in the private sector, he began researching any companies or organizations that might be linked to the kinds of men who had confronted them. Jason had dealt with shady deals and high-level corporate intrigue in the past, and he was certain that whatever this was, it had to be connected to some kind of underground operation. After several days of pushing through dead ends and chasing leads that didn't go anywhere, they finally got their first break. Keanu's contact came through with a surprising lead: a name, a company, and a group of individuals who had been making waves in the underground world for years. "The people you're looking for aren't just fighters," Keanu's contact told him over the phone. "They've been running things behind the scenes for a long time. They control a lot of the underground fight circuits, but it goes deeper than that. Think weapons, mercenaries, high-stakes bets, blackmail, the whole package." Jason, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. "So these aren't just random thugs. We're talking about a syndicate?" "Bigger than that," the contact replied. "This isn't a typical crime syndicate. They've got connections everywhere: governments, military contractors, you name it. And they've been keeping tabs on you two for a while." Keanu's pulse quickened. "Why?" The contact's voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper. "Because you've crossed their path. You might not know it, but your past roles, the movies you've done, they've caught the attention of some very dangerous people. You've played the role of a hero too many times, and now they think you're the real deal. They want to know if you are." It didn't take long for Keanu and Jason to realize the gravity of what they had uncovered. They were no longer just two action stars caught up in a random incident. They had unknowingly become players in a high-stakes game involving international mercenaries, corrupt organizations, and the dangerous world of underground fight clubs that extended far beyond anything they had ever imagined. The group, known only by their cryptic name, the Syndicate, had connections everywhere. They ran illegal betting rings, fought wars in foreign countries, and blackmailed high-profile individuals. And Keanu and Jason. They weren't being targeted because of their fame, but because their skills had inadvertently made them valuable targets in the eyes of the Syndicate. As Keanu and Jason dug deeper into the shadows of this organization, they began to understand just how far-reaching their influence was. They had no idea that their past roles in action films, where they had portrayed fighters, would make them so much of a threat. But in the eyes of the Syndicate, these roles had blurred the line between fantasy and reality. They saw them as true, threats to their operations, and that made them potential players, or obstacles in the Syndicate's dangerous games. The pieces began to fit together. The biker in the street, the cryptic warning in the cafe, the mysterious figure who had approached them in the alleyway, it was all part of the Syndicate's plan to either recruit them or eliminate them as a threat. And now, Keanu and Jason had to make a choice. Would they run from the danger and try to disappear, or would they face it head-on, fully aware of the risks? As the days passed, the decision became clearer. Keanu knew one thing for sure: there was no going back now. They had already stepped into the world of shadows, and to survive, they would have to fight. And if the Syndicate wanted to test them, Keanu and Jason would show them exactly what they were capable of, where Keanu and Jason take the fight to the Syndicate. It's a high-risk, high-reward battle that could change everything. Will they emerge victorious, or will they become just another casualty in the game of shadows? Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. What do you think they should do next? Are Keanu and Jason ready to take on the Syndicate? The decision had been made. There was no turning back. Keanu and Jason weren't going to run. They never did. The only way out now was through, and if it meant facing the Syndicate head-on, then that's exactly what they would do. But as they sat across from one another in a nondescript hotel, Room preparing for the fight ahead, they both knew this wouldn't be like any fight they had faced before. No choreographed stunts, no camera angles to hide their flaws. This was real. This was life and death. Keanu leaned forward, his eyes sharp. We need to find their stronghold. That's where it all starts. We take the fight to them before they get the chance to come after us. Jason nodded, his hand tapping the table, rhythmically an outward sign of the quiet tension inside. You know they won't make it easy. They've got resources, information. They've been watching us for months, maybe longer. Keanu didn't blink. Then we give them something they weren't expecting. Jason looked at him with a wry smile. A little bit of chaos. Keanu's smile was small, but it was there. Exactly. The plan was set in motion the moment Keanu and Jason had gathered the intel they needed. It wasn't just about infiltrating the syndicate's lair. It was about showing them that they weren't just the characters they had portrayed on screen. They weren't just heroes, they were survivors, and they had a set of skills that would make even the most hardened mercenaries think twice. They started with a simple move, hitting the syndicate where it hurt. Jason used his connections to infiltrate an underground betting ring that the group was known to run. With his knowledge of how these operations worked, he managed to place himself at the center of the action, gaining access to their encrypted communication channels. Keanu, on the other hand, dug deeper into the personal files of several key figures in the syndicate. He uncovered a web of corruption, illegal arms deals, and covert operations that spanned continents. It was clear that this wasn't just some gang. This was an empire built on control, manipulation, and power. And the more they learned, the more they realized how far-reaching and dangerous the organization truly was. But the more they uncovered, the more they realized they were not alone in this fight. They weren't just dealing with the syndicate's usual operatives. Someone, or something, had been waiting for them to come to this point. And soon enough, they realized they had a bigger enemy to contend with. It started subtly at first. Odd phone calls, unexplained glitches in their surveillance, and shadows just outside their line of sight. At first it seemed like the usual paranoia of being hunted, but then they saw it. In an encrypted message, Jason intercepted. There was a name that meant nothing at first, but once Keanu traced it, it sent a chill down his spine. The name was Viper. Keanu had heard of Viper before, but only in rumors. He had always assumed it was just a legend, an urban myth designed to keep people in line. But now, with the name sitting in front of him, the truth became clear. Viper wasn't just a myth. They were a shadowy figure at the top of the syndicate's hierarchy, a ghost that no one could see but everyone feared. Keanu met Jason's eyes. We've been playing checkers. Viper's the king. Jason didn't say anything for a moment, processing the revelation. Then he let out a long breath. So we're not just taking on a criminal syndicate, we're going after a ghost. Keanu stood up, his decision made. Then we make them visible. We force them to show themselves. And when they do, we end this. The last step of their plan was dangerous, even by their standards. They knew that going after Viper would expose them to everything the syndicate had at their disposal. But Keanu and Jason weren't interested in half measures. They had made it this far. They were in too deep now. The night before, they were set. To confront Viper's headquarters, Keanu and Jason sat together, sharpening their weapons, both the physical ones and the mental ones. They knew that everything they had done up to this point had been leading to this moment. There was no room for mistakes. Jason broke the silence. You know, this is either going to be the most ridiculous thing we've ever done, or the smartest. Keanu chuckled softly, the tension in the room lifting just slightly. Either way, it's going to be unforgettable. Jason smiled, his eyes hard. We're not just doing this for us, Keanu. We're doing it for everyone they've hurt, every person they've exploited. Keanu's gaze hardened, his resolve steely. And we're doing it for ourselves. This is our fight now. The next morning, they drove to the heart of the syndicate's operations, a heavily guarded compound, located just outside the city, tucked away in a secluded area. Keanu and Jason knew this was the moment of truth. If they succeeded, they would dismantle the syndicate. If they failed, they wouldn't live to regret it. They approached the compound, under the cover of darkness, their plan already in motion. Jason, using his expertise, disabled the compound's security systems, while Keanu led the charge, his silent steps betraying no hint of fear. The layout of the compound was a labyrinth, but their mission was clear. Find Viper, take them out. End this. As they infiltrated the inner sanctum, their hearts raced with adrenaline. They could feel the tension building, the inevitable clash of wills drawing closer. The building was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of equipment in the background. Every step was calculated, every move precise. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. When they finally reached the inner office, they were met by a cold, calm figure sitting behind a desk. A woman, Viper. She was nothing like they had expected. No mask, no cryptic symbols, just a sharp-eyed, calculating strategist. She was the mastermind. Well, well, Viper said, her voice smooth but dangerous. The movie stars think they can take me down. Keanu and Jason stood their ground, ready for whatever came next. This wasn't a movie, and they weren't playing roles. This was their real fight. We're not here for theatrics, Keanu said. We're here to end this. Viper's lips curled into a smile. Then come and get me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with the final showdown. How do you think this will end? Will Keanu and Jason be able to stop the syndicate? The tension in the room was palpable. Keanu and Jason stood face to face with Viper, the elusive mastermind behind the syndicate, in her sleek, cold office deep within their fortress-like compound. The atmosphere was charged with an energy unlike anything they had ever experienced. This was no longer a battle of fists or stunts. It was a test of resolve, survival, and wits. Viper's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the urgency of the moment. She had known they would come. She had been waiting for them, and now that they were here, she wasn't about to back down. I have to admit I'm impressed, Viper said, her tone cool and calculating. You two have proven to be much more than a nuisance, but you're too late. The syndicate's power is already cemented. You can't stop what's already in motion. Keanu's eyes never wavered from hers. We didn't come here to stop it. We came here to end it. Jason cracked his knuckles, stepping forward, his body radiating readiness. And we're not leaving without doing just that. Viper smiled, as if she had been expecting this response. With a slow motion, she pressed a button under her desk. The room darkened, and the unmistakable sound of locking doors echoed throughout the compound. Keanu and Jason immediately recognized what was happening. This is how it works, Viper said, rising from her chair and walking toward them. You think you're the heroes of this story, but there's no room for heroes here. This is my world, and now you'll play by my rules. Without warning, the lights flickered, and the entire room seemed to shift. The sound of heavy boots approaching filled the air, and within moments a group of heavily armed mercenaries surrounded them, each one ready to fight. The syndicate's muscle had arrived, and this time it wasn't just a handful of bikers. They were well-trained, organized, and prepared to eliminate any threat. Keanu and Jason exchanged a glance, and without a word, they moved into action. Their training and instincts kicked in. Every step they took, every punch they threw, was precise. They moved like a unit, seamlessly coordinating their attacks. The mercenaries were good, but Keanu and Jason were better. Jason took on two of the men charging him, using his speed and precision to disarm one and incapacitate the other with a swift kick to the chest. Keanu moved like a shadow, taking out another mercenary with a quick, brutal strike to the neck. Every movement was clean, practiced, as though they were in their element. Viper watched with a calculating gaze as her men fell, one by one. She didn't seem worried, though. She knew this wasn't the final test. She had been expecting them to fight their way through the first wave. What came next would be the real challenge. Suddenly, the sound of multiple doors opening echoed around them. More mercenaries, even more well-armed than before, flooded the room. This time there were no breaks in the fighting. There was no time to think or breathe. Every moment was life or death. Keanu and Jason pushed forward, their movements flawless. But the sheer number of enemies was overwhelming. Their bodies were beginning to feel the strain. Every punch, every kick, every dodge took more out of them. They could feel the weight of the fight bearing down on them. And then the final blow came. Viper, having observed everything with calm precision, moved from the shadows with a sleek, lethal look in her eyes. She was no longer the calculating mastermind behind a desk. Now she was the hunter. She was armed with 2 short blades, each gleaming in the low light, her movements graceful and deadly. With one swift move, she was on Keanu, her blade slicing through the air. Keanu narrowly dodged the first strike, but the second blade grazed his arm. A sharp sting of pain that reminded him this wasn't a movie. This was real. Jason saw his partner in danger and lunged toward Viper, but she anticipated his move and blocked his attack with a fluid twist. Their fight was nothing like the others. This was personal. Viper had no intention of letting them walk away alive. Jason and Keanu fought side by side, their synchronicity on full display. But even their combined skills couldn't easily counter Viper's speed and lethal precision. It was clear that she was no ordinary opponent. She was a product of years, of training and ruthlessness, someone who had been hardened by countless battles. Viper's blade came down toward Keanu once more, but in that split second, he saw it. An opening. A brief moment of vulnerability. With one swift motion, Keanu grabbed her wrist, twisting it just enough to disarm her, sending one of the blades skidding across the floor. Jason, seizing the opportunity, knocked the other blade from her hand and delivered a powerful roundhouse kick that sent her crashing against the far wall. But even as Viper lay stunned, she was not finished. With a look of sheer fury in her eyes, she lunged at Jason, trying to land a fatal blow. But Keanu was quicker this time. He stepped in, grabbing her and throwing her to the ground with a force that seemed to echo throughout the room. Viper gasped for breath, blood dripping from her wounds. She was cornered now, and there was nowhere left to run. "You're done," Keanu said, his voice cold and final. "This ends now." Viper's lips curled into a smile despite the blood on her face. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "The syndicate is everywhere. You'll never get rid of us, never." Keanu and Jason exchanged a look. They knew the battle was far from over. Even if they took Viper down, the syndicate would still be a massive threat, lurking in the shadows. But this fight had been theirs to win, and they had won it. The room was silent now, the sounds of battle gone. Viper was unconscious on the floor, her plans for dominance shattered. The syndicate's grip on the underground world had been broken, at least for now. Keanu and Jason had done what they came to do. But as they stood over her, their bodies battered and bruised, neither of them felt triumphant. They knew the fight wasn't over. The syndicate had been crippled, but it would adapt, it would rebuild. And the world they had just uncovered wasn't going away anytime soon. "What now?" Jason asked, looking down at Viper with a grim expression. Keanu sighed, wiping the sweat and blood from his brow. "Now we make sure it stays over. We bring what we know to the authorities, expose the truth. No more shadows, no more games." Jason nodded. "But we'll be ready if they come back." Keanu smiled, the fight still burning in his eyes. "Always. Thank you for joining us on this wild ride. If you want to see what happens next, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. How do you think Keanu and Jason will handle the next challenge? Share your thoughts below.